Hey everyone, before we dive into today's stories, let's set an ambitious goal. Can we hit 200 likes on this video? Smashing that like button not only supports the channel, but it also helps us bring more stories your way. So go ahead, tap that like button, and let's make it happen. Chapter 1. The Invitation. The trill of Jess's ringtone pierced the silence of her cramped studio apartment. She paused the true crime documentary blaring on her laptop and glanced at the name flashing on her phone's screen. Anna. A genuine smile broke across Jess's face for the first time in weeks. She hadn't spoken to her old college roommate since before the pandemic hit. She swiped to answer, saying, "Well, hey there, stranger, it's been a minute." Anna's bubbly laugh flowed through the speaker. "Too long. I was starting to think you might have forgotten about me." "As if I could ever forget your bad singing in the shower," Jess teased. She curled up happily on her sofa, ready to catch up. After chatting about their lives and jobs, Anna cut to her reason for calling. "So, a bunch of us girls were thinking of renting one of those lakeside cabins at Bitterwood this weekend to relax. I figured you could use a little R&R yourself. What do you say?" Jess hesitated. The idea of driving for hours to bumble around the wilderness with Anna's rowdy friends sounded less than appealing. Her usual weekend plans involved pajamas, takeout, and Netflix. But Anna's pleading tone wore her down. "Come on. When's the last time you took a real vacation? You've got to get out of that apartment before you moss over completely. It'll be good for you." Jess sighed, eyeing the dust accumulating on every surface around her. Maybe Anna had a point. And really, did she have any better plans? "All right, fine. You've convinced me. A weekend at Bitterwood could be fun." She hoped the forced cheeriness in her voice sounded sincere. Anna squealed, babbling about how excited she was, and Jess couldn't help but smile again. A happy spell just seemed to radiate from Anna sometimes. Surely a few days away soaking up that positivity would do Jess good. They hashed out the trip details, and after hanging up, Jess sat pondering this impromptu disruption to her routine. A faint unease pricked at the corner of her mind, though she couldn't quite place why. Chalking it up to garden variety social anxiety, she put on some upbeat music and started packing. This weekend would be rejuvenating, she told herself, a much-needed reset out in nature. Still, as she drifted off to sleep that night, the echo of lapping waves seemed to creep under her door from the hallway, when surely no lakes lay within miles of her landlocked apartment. The phantom sounds followed her into fitful dreams of shadowed waters that left her unsettled upon waking. But there were preparations to be made. So Jess shoved away the shapeless anxieties needling at her subconscious and bustled about her small home, hoping the nervous energy buzzing through her veins would settle during the long drive ahead. Chapter 2. Road Trip. Jess arrived outside Anna's apartment building fashionably late the next morning. Her reliable old Subaru rumbled happily after the 2-hour drive out of the city, soaking up the sunshine. As soon as Anna emerged, lugging her floral suitcase, Jess knew she'd been right to come. Anna's wide, welcoming grin cracked her lingering reservations wide open. She leaned over to push open the passenger door, clearing a space amid the snack detritus covering her seats. Anna tossed in her bag and settled into the faded upholstery. "Sorry for the mess," Jess said sheepishly. "I wasn't sure how hungry we'd get." Anna just laughed, that melodic laugh Jess hadn't realized she'd missed so much. "Are you kidding? Road trip food is half the fun. Ooh, you brought sour straws." Jess smiled, basking in the familiar warmth of Anna's presence beside her, and pulled back onto the highway. They soon left behind the cramped office buildings and congested streets, replacing them with soaring evergreens and rolling pastures. Jess rolled down her window, breathing deep the earthy scent of wilderness drifting through the crisp autumn air. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Anna fiddled with the radio dial until she landed on a pop station. Soon she was crooning dramatically along with the top 40 hits, dancing in her seat. Jess couldn't keep from giggling at her friend's antics. She had forgotten how much she loved Anna's carefree spirit, As the miles slid beneath her tires, Jess let the stresses of work and city life melt away. Out here, the world seemed immersed in a simpler light. Vibrant leaves drifting lazily downward, sunlight dappling through the branches, the lonely cry of a hawk circling high above. Fall's natural splendor stretched out untouched to the horizon. By late afternoon, the paved highway gave way to a dusty gravel road winding deep into the pine barrens. Jess leaned forward and squinted through the trees until a weathered wooden sign emerged ahead. Camp Bitterwood. "We're here!" Anna cheered. She turned the music down as they pulled into the deserted parking lot. Her celebratory smile faltered only a moment when she spotted Jess's apprehensive frown. "Chin up, Buttercup," she exclaimed. "This weekend is going to be amazing. Just you wait. Now let's go meet the others at our cabin before they drink all the wine." Jess plastered on an agreeable grin, hoping her unease at being so isolated out here didn't show. She focused on hauling their bags inside the cramped but cozy cabin nestled against the lake shore that would be their home for the next few nights. Laughter and happy shouts rang out to greet them as they stepped into the glow of the crackling fire their friends had started. Yes, this would be rejuvenating, Jess repeated in her head like a soothing mantra. She took a deep, steadying breath as the golden firelight flickered across her face, casting dancing shadows over the sun-worn wooden walls. Everything would be just fine. Chapter 3. First Signs. Dusk fell fast once the sun dipped behind the towering pines surrounding Camp Bitterwood. Jess sat tucked away on the cabin's small deck overlooking the lake, nibbling on the chili Anna heated up for dinner. She kept peering down at the dark water lapping gently 15 feet below, searching for she knew not what. Anna's boisterous friends chattered and laughed around the fire, their beer cans cracking open one after another as the night wore on. Jess didn't mind the solitude out here away from the chaos. She basked in the tranquility of the stars glimmering into visibility above the jagged black tree line, until faint splashing echoed up from the lake, followed by a soft but urgent whimper. Jess froze, straining her eyes toward the shoreline 50 yards left of her deck. A cloud must have briefly obscured the moon, for she could see nothing but fathomless shadows shifting there. Was someone swimming this late? Where were they? She stood, debating whether to call out, when Anna crashed through the sliding door behind her. "There you are," she exclaimed, pulling Jess into a slightly drunken hug. "Come tell us spooky stories." Jess glanced back reluctantly one more time, but the shore was peaceful once more. She let Anna tug her inside to the fire, shaking off the eerie sounds of her overactive imagination. Still, she felt cold fingers trail lightly down her neck before Anna closed the cabin door, making her shiver. Over the next few hours, Jess slowly relaxed again, lulled into complacency by the wine and the ridiculous ghost tales her friends told. She even shared a few of her own, laughing along with the others. Until a sharp scream from the lake cut through their chatter. The group fell silent, all turning to stare wide-eyed at the dark water beyond the cabin windows. A scream meant someone was hurting, or else horribly frightened. Jess stood, heart suddenly racing. She knew that scream had been no drunken illusion. "Someone's in trouble out there," she said shakily. But her friends just blinked up at her in confusion, offering hesitant chuckles. "What scream?" Anna asked, shooting her a concerned look. "I didn't hear anything." Unease crept cold fingers down Jess's spine. How could they not have heard a sound that loud and clear? She rushed for the back deck again, desperate to peer into the night's impenetrable void. Behind her, nervous laughter echoed among her friends at this bizarre behavior. Only endless darkness greeted Jess at the railing as she strained every sense trying to penetrate the silence. Had she imagined it after all? But no. Every hair on her body still prickled with residual alarm. She knew that agonized scream had been real as the goosebumps rising on her arms. Real and close. Far too close for comfort. Jess retreated inside, anxiety swelling, trying to ignore the concerned stares of her friends. She mumbled excuses about feeling tired, slipping into bed to stare wide-eyed at the dark ceiling beams above her, waiting endlessly for the scream to pierce the night once more. But this time, Only foreboding quiet filled her straining ears, broken occasionally by raucous giggles from the girls still swapping stories around the dying fire. Sleep remained out of reach for Jess that night as she tossed and turned beneath her wool blanket. The waiting darkness seemed alive somehow here, a predator lurking just out of sight, watching, seeking the perfect moment to reveal itself, and she was trapped as its prey with nowhere to run. So she lay restless in the looming shadows, counting her frantic heartbeats, knowing with cold certainty the haunting of Bitterwood Lake had already begun. This place held a sinister secret her soul recognized, even if she could not yet name it. But its dark revelation would come soon enough. Of that Jess had no doubt. Something evil lurked within these woods, and it had turned a hungry eye upon her the moment she arrived. Chapter 4. Legends of Bitterwood. Morning sunshine finally chased away the ominous shadows haunting Jess's restless night. She rose groggily from the lumpy cabin bed, body aching from tension. The other girls were still passed out like the dead after their late-night revelry. Jess poured herself a strong cup of coffee, hoping the caffeine could shock some alertness into her foggy mind. She carried it out to the deck, determined to shake off last night's paranoid unease. But in the harsh light of day, nothing seemed amiss in the pastoral landscape. Squinting against the glinting sun, Jess noticed a lone fisherman in a tiny boat bobbing near the middle of the lake. On impulse, she called out, "How's the fishing this morning?" The old man glanced back in surprise before motoring closer. "Not much biting today, miss. You folks just arriving to Bitterwood?" Jess smiled, encouraged by the man's friendly demeanor. "Yeah, my friends and I are staying in that cabin for the weekend. It's a gorgeous area out here." The fisherman frowned, his weathered face growing somber beneath his worn cap. "Aye, gorgeous it may be. But not everything is as it seems at Bitterwood." Alarm prickled across Jess's skin at his ominous tone. She kept her reply light despite the dread pooling in her gut. "What? You don't think this place is haunted or anything, do you?" She forced a playful laugh. The man simply gazed back, eyes dark with knowing. These woods have long kept their secrets. But if you stay here, you may just learn their mysteries. With that cryptic response, he restarted his sputtering engine and motored away, leaving Jess staring uneasily after him. She hoped desperately he was just an eccentric local trying to spook the tourists. But she had a sickening feeling his warnings held more truth than she cared to examine. By the time Jess returned inside, the other girls were finally stirring. While they cooked a subdued breakfast, she nervously relayed the fisherman's remarks. Her friends glanced around uneasily as she spoke. Finally, Anna replied, "Okay, yeah, that's super creepy. But ghosts aren't real, right?" The quiver in her voice belied her light words. There must be some legend around here that he was talking about, Jess mused. She needed to understand what evil had seeped into this land, casting a darkness over their carefree weekend. "Let's ask around and see what we can find out." The group reluctantly agreed, so after eating, they drove to the main camp office. The scruffy manager chuckled at Jess's query about Bitterwood myths. "You city kids and your ghost stories," he said while totaling up their camping fees. But at their crestfallen faces, he relented. "All right, I'll play along. Folks round here do say Bitterwood Lake is haunted by Elizabeth Opal, the drowned bride." He recounted the tale of a beautiful young newlywed who fell to her death in the lake decades ago, just days after her wedding. Some claimed her distressed ghost still cried out from the dark waters for her lost love. "But these are just campfire fancies, of course," he added upon noticing Jess's evident unease. She glanced outside at the placid lake with new wariness, for legends often carry an anchor in truth, she knew. And she was starting to realize the malicious spirit said to occupy Bitterwood's waters had turned its lonely eyes upon her. Chapter 5. Restless Spirits. That evening, Jess sat tensely on the cabin's back deck, eyes glued to the lake. She had excused herself from the revelry inside, too anxious to pretend all was well. The others had laughed off the bride legend as silly folklore, but Jess knew some darker essence haunted this place. She could feel its gaze crawling across her skin even now in the fading light. "Where are you?" she silently implored the hidden watcher. "Show yourself." Her impatience for a decisive confrontation mounting, she almost hoped to see a phantom bride rise from the lake at last. As twilight deepened, a thin mist began curling over the still water. Jess shivered, the damp air needling through her thin sweater. A flicker of movement at the lake's far end made her bolt upright. The mist was forming an elongated shape, almost like a woman's veil. But as she stared, the delicate wisps drifted apart, erased by a slight breeze. Jess's pulse hammered in her ears. No, it must have been a trick of the shadows. She sank back into her lawn chair, nerves jangling, until a mournful wail pierced the night, like a lost spirit calling across the water. Goosebumps erupted across Jess's flesh. That was no loon's cry. It spoke of sorrow and rage. She glanced desperately back at the party blazing inside the cabin. Music and laughter drowned out the unearthly sounds only she could hear. Surely she couldn't be imagining the malice echoing now around the lake's shrouded perimeter. A splashing splash made Jess whip her head toward the left shoreline. She glimpsed for one heart-stopping second a pale female form breaching the water. Silvery hair framed the translucent face, staring back at Jess with hollow, beseeching eyes. Then the phantom sank soundlessly beneath the inky surface once more. Jess gripped the railing hard, willing herself not to faint or cry out. This was the ancient spirit who had fixated on her. She felt its fury boring into her back as she fled inside. But her panicked gasps only drew concerned looks from her friends. None had heard the anguished wailing outside, or seen that desperate, ghostly woman grasping for help just out of reach. Harsh laughter rang out at Jess's stammered description of the spirit bride she'd witnessed. Anna gripped her shoulder firmly, speaking with exaggerated calmness as if addressing a child. "Hon, I know you're stressed out, but there are no ghosts here. You're letting this spooky legend get to you." Patronizing disbelief shone from all their faces, but Jess knew what she'd seen, and she had a terrifying premonition that her stay at the lake was soon to turn much deadlier. Chapter 6. Targeted. A sense of dread hounded Jess's steps throughout the next day. She jumped at shadows, constantly peering over her shoulder for pursuers she could not see. But no ghostly form emerged from lake or woods to attack. Perhaps it was biding its time, luring prey into complacency before striking. By dusk, Jess could no longer stomach sitting around the fire with her indifferent friends. She needed to confront the spirit that seemed to be toying with her. Waiting only built her panicked anticipation to unbearable levels. Leaving the others singing drunkenly, she strode alone to the end of the moonlit dock. Only a velvet void met her demands that the watcher show itself. Wind moaned softly through the pines, mimicking a distressed woman's cries. Shivering as much from fear as from cold, Jess finally turned to go back. But halfway down the dock, the spectral wailing erupted close behind her. She whirled to see mist coalescing at the dock's end into an elongated silhouette. The phantom bride had returned. Jess stumbled backwards, eyes fixed on its translucent form undulating toward her. This was no legend. The spirit's palpable fury buffeted Jess like a winter gale. Lank hair and sodden dress swayed around the pale bride as she hovered down the dock. Right before she reached Jess's frozen form, the phantom dove over the side and disappeared into the lake once more. The ensuing silence rang in Jess's ears after that show of supernatural force. She raced back to the cabin on trembling legs. But Anna just sighed when Jess burst in, babbling about the vengeful ghost's nearly tangible presence on the dock. "I think it's time you lay off the wine, hon," she said gently, refusing to acknowledge the terror bright in Jess's eyes. Jess finally collapsed into bed, knowing she alone carried this burden. The bride's restless spirit had brought a palpable darkness to Bitterwood, and only she recognized the danger coiled there under the deceptive serenity. Why had the phantom chosen her and not one of the others? She rested uneasily beneath her blankets, fearing whatever revelation the morning light might bring. Morning's arrival did nothing to ease Jess's mind. Heavy rain clouds approached, shrouding the woods in gloom. As she stared absently across the lake from the back deck with a mug of coffee, she began noticing disturbing signs of an otherworldly visitor. Muddy footprints led away from the water and stopped beneath her bedroom window. Dried red stains flecked the glass pane above the sill. And when she rushed inside to check, she discovered long gashes had sliced through her pillow overnight. Stuffed white feathers clung to crusted blood left by the unseen claws. Jess's hands began to shake, spilling hot coffee over her numb fingers. She scarcely felt the pain. This attack confirmed the Phantom's sole focus was now her. Paralyzed by the implied threat, Jess remained huddled on the sofa while her friends spent the day playing cards and poking fun at her paranoia. Their jabs barely registered through the static filling her skull. She stared fixedly at the lake's steel surface, ominously still today except when ripples hinted at the evil gliding unseen below. She longed desperately to escape this place, but night was falling fast. Darkness would bring a silencing shroud, preventing any cries for help from penetrating these dense woods. But screams were sure to come, once that patient predator chose to strike. Chapter 7. Possession. The day's tension reached an unbearable peak once shadows stole over Bitterwood. Jess paced the creaking floorboards, peering out at the woods as if the trees themselves might suddenly come to gruesome life. Her friend's escalating concern did little to ease her terror. They couldn't fathom the forces threatening to consume her. A timid knock at the front door made everyone freeze. Before Jess could stop her, Anna swung it open to reveal a haggard older woman hunched against the wind. She clutched a wool shawl around bony shoulders, stringy white hair whipping over her face. Behind her, the stormy sky had turned an ominous crimson. "You shouldn't be here," the woman rasped at Jess, weathered features creased with urgency. "The bride. She wants you." Stunned silence met this dire pronouncement. Jess's pounding heart nearly drowned out the wind screeching through the trees beyond. The woman clasped Jess's hands with surprising strength. "You must leave this place at once," she implored, watery eyes wide with insistence. "I know what Elizabeth wants. Please go before it's too late." Before Jess could respond, Anna stepped protectively between them. "I'm so sorry, but I think you're confused," she said firmly. "We don't know any Elizabeth." She glanced uncertainly at Jess, who stared back in dismayed recognition. "You know I speak the truth," the woman said sadly. But she turned and hobbled away into the gathering storm without another word. Anna quickly shut out the howling gale and barred the door behind their unexpected visitor. "Can we leave?" Jess pleaded to the room. "That woman confirmed this cabin is haunted by some vengeful spirit named Elizabeth. She said it's after me." Her friends exchanged uneasy glances as lightning flashed outside, revealing strange shadows writhing across the walls before vanishing. The wind rattled the roof violently, as if seeking entry. Anna took a deep breath. "Jess, you're clearly under a lot of stress. I should have never forced you to come here when you weren't ready." She trailed off helplessly. The hurt in her eyes at Jess's frantic rejection of her good intentions briefly broke through the panicked haze fogging Jess's mind. Anna had only wanted to help her relax and have fun. How could she explain the inexplicable darkness poisoning this place? Deflated, Jess squeezed Anna's hand in mute apology. Neither could accept the other's desperate truths. Outside, the storm intensified into a screaming maelstrom. The girls huddled anxiously in the firelit main room, hoping the cabin would withstand the onslaught. Except for Jess, who kept peering out the back windows toward the whipping lake. She knew the true threat came not from wind or rain, but from malicious spirits using nature's fury to shroud their approach. Even her friends let out cries of alarm when heavy thuds sounded on the roof, like clawed feet stomping overhead. But the noise faded, leaving no evidence of a physical intruder. Eventually, the girls settled onto couches and chairs, exhausted from their frayed nerves. One by one, they drifted to uneasy slumber. But Jess remained alert, watching the windows for ghostly faces. She hoped to catch a glimpse of the bride before she made her move. Around 3 a.m. by the grandfather clock's pendulum, the power abruptly cut out, submerging the cabin in absolute darkness. Jess gasped, gripping her chair arms as anxious voices called out around her. A sharp hiss by her ear made her whip her head around, but only impenetrable shadows filled her straining eyes. Cold fingers trailed down her cheek. Jess opened her mouth to scream a warning, but no sound came. She thrashed violently, yet her limbs would not respond. A cloying scent like rotting lilies choked off her breath. Desperate, she focused all her energy into a single fingertip. The effort made sweat bead on her forehead despite the frigid air. Slowly, agonizingly, she dragged her index finger onto the arm of the chair in Morse code. H-E-L-P. A floorboard creaked nearby, followed by Anna's quivering voice pleading into the dark. Jess? Jess, please say something. The phantom's oppressive hold kept Jess paralyzed and mute, but she tapped her desperate message over and over until suddenly the suffocating grip released her from its clutches. Jess collapsed forward, gagging for air. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders and she cried out hoarsely. But it was only Anna and the others, faces etched with fear in the faint glow of a lone candle. "What happened?" Anna begged. "You went all stiff. We couldn't get a response." Jess just shook her head wildly, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks at being freed from that smothering void. But she sensed this was only the start of the spirit's ruthless siege to possess her soul. Chapter 8. Sacrifice. No one slept the remainder of that endless night. The girls huddled anxiously in the candlelit cabin, listening to the ongoing storm rage outside. Inside, the gloom swirled with unseen currents of malevolence just beyond their sight. Jess sat shuddering uncontrollably, skin clammy from her close call. At dawn, a decision was made. They had to flee this cursed place before the phantom returned. Anna and Jess's friends seemed shaken enough by the paranormal attack to finally heed her warnings of danger. They quickly packed bags with trembling hands, eager to escape the confines of the haunted cabin. But when Jess stepped cautiously outside to lead the group to the cars, her blood turned to ice. Resting innocuously on the back deck waited a wedding gown, the white lace soaked through with dark stains. Crimson footprints left a gory trail all the way back to the lake's edge. Jess stared at the foreboding sight, bile rising in her throat. The spirit was sending a twisted message. It would claim Jess's essence for itself one way or another. Whether she left here alive mattered not to the covetous phantom. Sensing the hideous ploy, rage temporarily overpowered Jess's dread. She refused to spend her life glancing over her shoulder for this sadistic entity. Better to face it now than be forever stalked by its possessive evil. Ignoring her friends' frantic protests, Jess stormed down the twisting trail left by the bloodied footprints. Their coppery stench mixed sickeningly with rotten floral perfume, assaulting her senses. She gagged, but pushed on toward Destiny's final standoff. At the end of the gruesome path, only gray mist swirled over the placid lake. Jess walked to the very edge of the doomed bride's watery tomb. "Come out and face me, you coward!" she screamed into the stillness. Her voice echoed over the waiting expanse. "I won't become your prisoner. If you want me, come and take me." She panted harshly, adrenaline and anger coursing through her veins. The calm surface slowly began swirling counterclockwise as a shadow rose from the depths. Elizabeth's pale face crested the water, droplets streaming from her sunken features. Her placid expression twisted into a hungry smile when she spied her intended victim waiting helplessly before her. Reality seemed to waver around Jess, the only solid point the phantom bride drifting closer. This was not some legend. The ancient malevolence here was catastrophically real. Jess took an unsteady step back, wondering if she could outrun death itself. Before the ghost reached Jess, an ear-piercing shriek rent the air behind her. She whirled to see Anna sprinting down the dock, anguish carved into her familiar features. Jess instinctively rushed to intercept her instead. "Anna, stop! What are you doing?" she cried. But her friend barreled past, flinging herself off the end of the dock straight at the waiting phantom. Jess screamed as she helplessly watched Anna hit the water and sink beneath the ghost's outstretched arms. The spirit's shocked face morphed into an outraged howl. Anna's sacrifice had disrupted her murderous plan, stealing Jess out of her grasp. The bride thrashed violently, churning the lake into a whirlpool, trying to regain her intended victim. But Jess clung to the dock, her horrified eyes never leaving the spot where her selfless friend had disappeared below. After what felt like an eternity, the maelstrom stilled. The wrathful spirit sank slowly back into the silent depths, her prize stolen away. Jess lay frozen in shock and anguish. Around her, the woods seemed to exhale in relieved release as the malevolent presence retreated into dormancy. When Jess finally could move again, she scanned the water frantically for any sign of Anna. Her despairing gaze landed on a pale face drifting limply along the shoreline. Jess dove in heedless of danger and swam for her friend's motionless form. She dragged the waterlogged body onto the muddy bank, collapsing beside it in grief. Sobs racked Jess's exhausted frame as she clung to her cherished friend, who had sacrificed everything to save her. The others arrived in a frenzied rush, crying out at the tragic scene. They managed to revive Anna enough to breathe raggedly, though she remained terrifyingly still. As the girls prepared the car to rush her to a hospital, Jess knelt in the dirt by Anna's head. "Why?" she choked out. "Why would you jump in the lake for me?" Anna's eyes cracked open, full of sorrow and love. "I saw your pain," she rasped. "You have so much life yet to live." She tried weakly to lift a comforting hand to Jess's cheek, but it fell limply back to earth. They drove away in mourning silence, the spectral bride's cruel laughter echoing across the lake. She had lost this contest, but her vengeance would simply pass to another vulnerable soul. Such was the endless cycle here, Bitterwood's legacy of corruption. Anna lingered in the hospital for weeks before the doctors said she could go home. Jess rarely left her side during the long recovery. She drove Anna to rehab sessions, helped her walk again, and simply sat with her on hard days when depression sank its claws in. After a lifetime of taking Anna's giving nature for granted, Jess promised herself she would spend every remaining moment proving her own selfless love in return. Anna never spoke of what she experienced in the lake's numbing depths after sacrificing herself to the vengeful ghost. Some old horrors cannot be put into words, but late at night, Jess would sometimes hear her crying out desperately in her sleep. On those haunted nights, all Jess could do was hold her tighter and channel all the strength she had into keeping the darkness at bay. Chapter 9. The Only Way Out. Though we drove away from that wretched lake, I could feel its evil presence following me, hungry for a return to finish what it started. Anna's selflessness had disrupted the spirit's plan, but not destroyed it. My nights twisted into horrors of feeling that phantom bride's clammy hands dragging me down into the depths as I struggled vainly. I'd wake drenched in sweat, hearing her distant screams of promised retribution. Dark circles hung permanently under my eyes. At home, strange events escalated despite Anna's attempts to keep me calm. Bulbs burst when I entered rooms, gusts of cold air swept behind me, and objects went missing only to reappear in bizarre places I knew I hadn't left them. The haunted look in my eyes scared Anna most of all. She decided I couldn't spend another minute in that town, so near the vengeful ghost yearning to reclaim me. Without telling our families, we packed our few belongings and left that very night. We drove for hours with no destination in mind. I hoped desperately that distance could save me, though the clinging miasma of Bitterwood never fully lifted from my spirit. When we stopped for gas at dawn, I used the last of my cash to pay and we pushed onward. We abandoned the car outside a small seaside town hundreds of miles from the cursed lake. Starting over with nothing was still better than waiting helplessly for that malignant spirit to fulfill its craving. The salty air cleared my head as we walked the pier lined with quaint shops. No ghosts haunted this cheerful place. For the first time in ages, I remembered what peace felt like. Anna smiled gently at the change coming over me. We found a warm inn to stay in and kind owners who needed help cleaning rooms. They let us live there and work to pay off our boarding. Though we missed home, this new life was built with our own hands, free of lingering darkness. But a familiar dread gripped my heart, arriving back at the inn one winter afternoon. Glancing up at our window, I saw the lace curtains billowing wildly, though the air was still. No mundane draft could unleash such fury. Panic surged through me. I rushed upstairs only to find the door hanging open. Inside, our cozy room was destroyed. Furniture smashed, clothes shredded and strewn about. My pulse roared in my ears. This was no normal break-in. In the bathroom, the shattered mirror showed words scrawled in red. "You cannot hide from me." Bile rose in my throat. After months of reprieve, the vengeful ghost had tracked me down. Our haven was now contaminated by an ancient evil obsessed with claiming my life. When I told Anna, stark fear filled her sunken eyes for the first time since we'd escaped Bitterwood. She had sacrificed so much to free me from that demon. Neither of us could bear sacrificing more. The inn owners tried soothing our hysterics, unable to see the true danger. But we knew our presence here endangered them too. That night we slipped away silently, leaving behind everything but the clothes we wore. We became fugitives constantly on the run, taking odd jobs under assumed names, barely scraping by, looking over our shoulders everywhere we went. No shelter lasted long before violent manifestations shattered our fragile sense of security. Years of evading that obsessive phantom drained life and hope from me. My youth withered under an unrelenting dread. But finally, I hit upon the only way out, to remove its vessel for stalking me. One night after Anna fell into restless sleep, I crept away with purpose. I stared for a long time at the murky river, mentally preparing for what had to be done. There could be no hesitation. After I slipped under the current and let the cold water embrace me, I saw Anna's stricken face appear above me on the shore. As darkness enclosed me, I breathed a silent apology to my devoted friend for breaking my promise to her. My death was the only way to set us both free. I awoke to rain pattering on my cheeks. Muddy riverbank cushioned my back. With a cry, I sat up. I was still alive. Anna knelt beside me, cheeks streaked with tears and rain. "You saved me," I rasped in awe. She shook her head. "No, you saved us both when you were willing to sacrifice everything as I once did." Anna helped me stand on shaky legs. Together we walked away from the river that nearly claimed me. I realized then that the ghost had never wanted my essence, only to twist my own life against me until it destroyed us. But I would not let it win. Though we never fully escaped the phantom's lingering presence, over time we learned to deny it power. Joy could be found, even within the haunting. Anna and I shored each other's light against the dark. The bride's wails still echo in my dreams, stirring primal panic. But I turn away from that darkness and awaken to gentle dawn light filtering through lace curtains in the little apartment Anna and I have made our sanctuary. The ghost of Bitterwood will always lurk in the periphery, craving the lives it failed to consume. But it does not own us. Each day we steal back from its grip. We grow stronger and leave its grasp further behind. For it is only the frigid past, while we face the future. And if it comes for me again, as I fear it someday shall, this time I will not run or sacrifice myself to escape. I will simply turn and walk on, focusing my sight on the light ahead. The light we have earned through so much darkness. For love is the only weapon that redeems. Chapter 10. Still haunted. In the years since I escaped the grasp of Bitterwood's vengeful spirit, I finished school and became a paranormal investigator. I travel the country seeking answers about the mysteries that haunt so many. Each case provides catharsis, helping exorcise my lingering trauma. But when a desperate letter arrived begging for aid at a familiar lodge near Bitterwood Lake, dread gripped me. The owner wrote of unexplained incidents, violent nocturnal attacks, apparitions stalking guests, cries emanating from the water at night. The bride was still searching for surrogate victims after I slipped her grasp. Though every fiber of my being recoiled, I knew I had to face the evil I unleashed as a reckless youth. If I could help spare others the torment I barely survived, It would bring the closure I craved. So I found myself again driving down that isolated road lined by gnarled trees that still poisoned my dreams. I glanced constantly at the passenger seat where my friend Anna always sat in better times. But for this trip, I came alone. The resort parking lot was deserted in the off-season chill. Across the gray lake, tendrils of mist swirled over the still surface. It looked placid enough, yet I could feel the brooding hunger pulsing beneath those dark depths. The aging owner greeted me with evident relief, escorting me inside the ill-fated lodge. My heart clenched passing the cabin where a ghost had once marked me for its own. Scorch marks now scarred its weathered exterior. That night I sat alone in the lodge's main hall, armed only with recording equipment and grit. The phantom arrived silently on the strike of midnight, a pale nimbus formed by the bar, slowly taking the silhouette of a veiled woman. My stomach lurched at the sight of Elizabeth's restless shade after all this time. Her empty eyes found me as a cruel smile twisted her spectral face. She clearly savored my obvious discomfort being back under her influence. The temperature dropped precipitously as she opened her mouth in a piteous wail only I could hear. But I steeled myself against her manipulations. Tonight we would come to terms. If I could glean why she remained so fixated on tormenting the living, perhaps I could convince her spirit to move on at last. "I'm here to help you find peace," I said clearly. The phantom continued drifting closer as I spoke. "Tell me why you're still haunting Bitterwood after all these years." A ghastly susurration arose surrounding me. I couldn't make out words, only a cacophony of anguished voices. The spirit was trying to lure me into her madness. "Let go of your pain," I urged, hands balling into fists. "Your suffering ties you here, but you can be free." She halted, cocking her head in an oddly innocent gesture of curiosity. For a moment I thought I had broken through. Then her banshee wailing resumed, shaking the walls with its force. The ghastly bride surged forward to loom directly over me, extending her pale hands like she meant to drag me back to a cold grave with her. I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing every fiber of will on resisting her pull. A powerful force suddenly flung me backward. My head cracked against the floorboards and brilliant light exploded across my vision. Silence rang out, broken only by the thud of my heartbeat. When I managed to sit up, cradling the knot on my skull, the spirit had vanished. The room's temperature was rising to normal. Glancing at my camera footage showed only an empty bar throughout our confrontation. As always, the phantom left no hard evidence of its existence, only lingering trauma. Though I failed to appease her, the fact that she attacked meant I had shaken the ghost's absolute control here. Few have dared stand against her possessive fury. But fighting darkness cannot be done alone. To protect the innocent souls she yet threatens, I must spread the truth about the bride's perpetual violence and malice. This evil has haunted Bitterwood for too long, passing from one hapless target to the next. But through understanding this legendary ghost as the sadistic predator she truly is, we can deprive her of the power fear grants. She will always prowl the boundaries of the living, craving the brightness she can never again possess. But we who still draw breath deny her dominion through the simple act of living on and loving freely. The bride's cold grasp cannot hold those who turn from her torturous shroud to walk joyfully arm in arm toward the light. Well, that's it, folks. I really hoped you enjoyed this story and it didn't scare you too much. If you're enjoying these spine-tingling tales and want to dive even deeper into the world of suspense and horror, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll be the first to hear our latest eerie stories and embark on thrilling audio journeys with us. Don't miss out on a single shiver or chill. Subscribe now and become part of our ever-growing community of horror enthusiasts.